we live? Is this working? Sorry, I was brewing coffee. Because I'm kind of moving slow today. But I really wanted to get live and color and show people kind of like some progress, and I don't know, this is really fun. I just have to like get coffee in my system so I can get going. How is everybody doing? I wore my leather jacket that has all my comic pins on it. It's even got the old interdimensional pins that are like long sold out from issue 1. But we're gonna make new pins for this new issue. So if you like pins, we have a lot coming, which is cool. Cool. So let me get files set up. So this one I've kind of got started, but I think it's got like some placeholder flats. But none of the colors are like set. I don't know that I love some of the color schemes so far. But I'll open some of the other ones in this series, and then you can see kind of like how this is the next in the sequence. So this is the last page that I have to do in the first dream sequence in our comic. So it's like, I think it takes place over the course of like 5 pages, and I've been trying to color them together because I really want them to like match visually, and I want to stay in the same, mindset while I'm coloring them. So there's a finished exclusive sneak peek of the finished page before it. So here, let me put them up side by side so you can see the spread. So we're basically finishing this spread today. So that's, one on the left is done. One on the right, we just have to match. So you can see how all these columns, the ocean, the icebergs, like all that stuff will do the same kind of level of detailing that's happening over here on the left. Text bubble shorts. Oh, you came here from the text bubble shorts. Nice. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering why we're not doing more lettering content. It's just because I'm trying to finish all the coloring of this issue, and then once the coloring is done, I'll switch back. There'll be like a week or 2 where I'm lettering the whole issue, and then you'll see like a ton of lettering content. So there you go. It's like, because I'm doing stuff in waves where it's like, first I gotta color it, then I gotta letter it, like you'll see the content reflect that, because I don't have enough time to like, or maybe the mental capacity to like switch back and forth to be fully in the mode of lettering or coloring this whole issue and then be thinking of lettering content. Like my brain can't do that, and I also just don't have the time. So you'll see a switch at some point where like there's going to be a ton of coloring content, and then there'll be a ton of lettering content, and you'll know that's when I've switched to lettering to finish this issue. Well, welcome everybody. Yeah, I think I need to open a couple more pages. So when I color sequences, I always try to keep all the pages in that sequence open so that I can like refer to every panel in that sequence across multiple pages, so I know that I'm like matching the styles, you know what I mean? There you go, that's better. So, sorry, I just had to I've also got it set up in Photoshop. I've got it set up so that I can have my windows set up properly so that when I'm streaming, I'm not covering up too much of the workspace. Yeah, let me open some more pages in the sequence so you can see, because we're going to be like referring to them a bunch as we go. I just finished this one yesterday. This one's going to be helpful reference as well. So this one shows kind of that I'm using a lot more greens and purples. And so we'll try to bring some of that into here too as we work on this page today. And I think I need one more. There's a couple more I need to open, actually. This sequence has a lot of nuance that I want to make sure I'm referencing. Yeah, this one. So here's the evil chili man. Here it is. This is also important to kind of reference and match as I'm coloring today. So you can see one of the things that I've done on the water is I use like quite a lot of halftone brushes on the water. So you get that kind of like gritty dot pattern. And then it makes all the characters that aren't as, that don't use as many halftones or dot patterns on them, like really pop from that background. It's just like, I've made shorts about this, but using different textures is like a way to create more contrast. So I'm taking full advantage of that here. When I zoom in, you can see how he really pops because he doesn't have any halftone shading on him. I'm going to do the same thing on this page where we're going to do like a lot of, over here on the right, like we're going to do a lot of like heavy halftone work on the water, and that'll hopefully make the characters pop a little bit more from the background. It'll also probably be really cool if there's a lot of halftone work on the water. It'll make this eyeball panel, this like inset eyeball panel pop, because we can have it be maybe a little bit more smooth. It's sort of the same theory that if there's a lot of halftone behind it, it might make that panel feel like really differentiated. So yeah, let's see. I think this one is the most, this is going to be the one that's the most important to reference as we're coloring. Oh, nice. Nathan T29. I just dropped in. I'm working on my own comic. How do you convey someone starting really confident, then changing to true fear? I mean, that's kind of just your story, right? Like that's, if you're making a comic, that's multiple panels, of watch. I'm assuming you're asking from like a lettering perspective, but like you can use normal lettering and do that all with 6 panels of watching someone's face change. You know what I mean? Like that's like a character, that's like a body language and character expression exercise, like the emotional change of confidence to fear is a story, you know what I mean? And comic books tell stories via multiple panels. So I wouldn't put that too much on the lettering. I would do that as through art, through the visuals, through showing a character changing, Hi, Ginger Snaps, hi. Yeah, it does look great, right? Like Lydia killed it on the line art, so I'm just going to try to do it justice today on the coloring. Your donation went to the void. It's probably delayed, I'm guessing. I don't know, we'll see. Thank you though if you donated. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I actually have to remember what I did, because I actually don't, to be honest, I don't fully remember how I built this one on the left. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually pull it apart by turning off some layers. Because I was working on this really quickly, just trying to get the look I wanted, and now I'm going to like reverse engineer that look by kind of like pulling off layers to see how I built it. Okay, so it looks like I'm going to try to just, okay, so I just put a gradient on the background to give me that water. Hang on, I got to turn off more layers. There's a lot going on. Okay, so I just put a light blue to darker blue gradient on the background. Then I put a purple gradient in to create a sense of distance, like it's dropping off into the shadows. And then I put a halftone on the water. So that's that halftone. Here, if I zoom in, you can see it. I'll turn it on and off. That blue halftone is just like a nice way to darken stuff down. But again, like there's a little bit of a halftone on her helmet here, but it's a much bigger dot pattern. The one in the background is denser and darker, so it helps differentiate her from the background. And then, and then I did the icebergs. which have their own halftone layers and highlights. And then I did a reflection of the ice in the water, just this like blue sort of shapes underneath all the icebergs to kind of create a sense of that they're reflecting down. It creates depth. And then over top of it, Bob Ross style, I called the layer Splish Splash, but it's just like white. It's like white caps on the water, where anywhere the water is colliding with like the base of a column or the base of like one of these icebergs. I put like a white, like just like quick brush strokes of white, which is like an old Bob Ross landscape technique. So then if I go over to, okay, so now I have to kind of figure out how far I've gotten on the one on the right. So I'm basically at the stage where I need to add halftone on the water, and I need to start detailing the ice. So we'll do that. So it looks like I used a halftone brush with this color blue, sort of a darker blue. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, so we'll do that. The cool thing is that you can set these brushes to smaller dot patterns, so I'll show you. So if you go into your brush settings and you go to texture, you can use the scale slider here, and the smaller you make the scale of your halftone brush, the denser and the smaller the dots are going to be. So it allows you to basically take like halftone brushes and get more mileage out of them, because you're not stuck with like really large dots or really small dots. You can actually like adjust the scale of the brush. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Mary Loves Medical, for the donation. And so the donations are working then. Good. Did Killer Cam, you donated too? Thank you. I appreciate it. It means a lot. How would you, okay, so you've also got another lettering question. How would you convey someone screaming out in the beginning, then slowly? Okay, so anytime you're talking about like a transition, you don't have to do that in the lettering. That can all just be over the course of several panels, watching somebody's tone change in how their body language is, how their expression is. Like, you don't have to do that in the lettering. But if you want to switch to them speaking in their own head, you can use narrative boxes. The narrative boxes are like a really powerful way to show interior thoughts without it being as cheesy as a thought balloon. Because I think thought bubbles are kind of dated. So I would do narrative boxes, and then when you do narrative boxes, this is something that is more common in Western comics, but you do narrative boxes and you pick a color that sort of represents that character. And you want to create like narrative clarity for the reader. So if you pick like a narrative box that's pink, you might pick that color because the character's costume is pink. So you can come up with narrative boxes that represent that character speaking inside their own head, and you can be inspired by their costume or something about like their personality that dictates what color you use. And that way, like, if you suddenly switch to them speaking in their own head, the reader you've trained the reader a little bit by showing them like, hey, this color narrative box means this character is speaking, if that makes sense. Oh, nice. This is M from the Discord. Welcome. Oh, yeah. Everybody go Everybody go join the Discord. I don't know if somebody can put a link in chat to join the Discord. But yeah, it's been popping off over there. We have like 400 people developing like their own community. I'm so busy I can't even keep track of everything that's happening over there, but it's like people are really killing it over there. They're like keeping that place really active. They're like answering each other's questions. It's been great. How do you even do that? What, do you mean draw? Well, I didn't technically draw this page. I'm just coloring this page. I can draw, but not this well. This is all Lydia's line art. So every time you see me coloring, it's for our comics, it's Lydia's line art. She's really, really good at drawing. Let's just say that. She's really good with perspective. So that's... She's kind of like, this page is kind of like a total flex. Like she's really like showing off her ability to render things like 4,000 columns going off into the distance. You know what I mean? And then she gives the pages to me and I cry because it's so much detail that I have to color. I remember on the other page, there was like this darker fade. I want to create more of a sense of depth. So I'm going to bring some purple in here because I really want this panel to fade from light to dark like pretty severely. But I don't love that color purple. Let me try something else. Maybe this one. That's okay. The problem with, you have to be careful because like, as I'm adding this purple fade here, you can see it's starting to blend in with this blue halftone that I put over top. And so those dots don't really, you can't really tell it's a halftone anymore. Like when I look at the lighter parts of the panel down here, like you can really see those dots pop. If I put a gradient to darken the background up here up top, it makes you lose some of those dots. So that could be some of the stylistic choice of this panel. Like it's kind of cool actually that the part of the fade is that the dots become more and more crisp as they come down. So maybe we leave it for now, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I might be here. I'll link the Discord in the chat. Give me a sec. The Discord is popping off, so I want to make sure like people are able to join it. Yeah, it's awesome. Like the coolest thread on the Discord is my favorite section is the art feedback requested, because people post stuff and then like other people, like including me, are able to like actually help them and kind of like give them little tips and tricks. There's also people showing off like their work in progress stuff, which is really fun. Like, cause there's not like pressure to finish really amazing stuff. You can just like post as you go, and people are like, everybody's like super positive and really encouraging. So I'm having like a really good time. Just watching like people show off their art, and like it's like a safe place, you know, to show what they can do. Here, I'll put it in the chat. So if you want to join the Discord, it's here. The Discord is also linked. Yeah, it's linked in our bio, but that's an easy link for everybody if you want to join. Yeah, Mr. Woods, I'll figure out I'll figure out how to let people link stuff later. I don't want to fuss with it while I'm live, but there's the link for now. So I'm just like flipping through blending modes here. Oh, that's kind of cool. So I'm just doing a trick. So every like art program has blending modes. Photoshop, the way you cycle through them is you hold down Shift and you press plus and minus, and you just like flip through the different blending modes. And you can see like, maybe I do just like it going back to purple. Let's do that. So what I like about this is now it fades from light blue to darker blue to like this like lavender color. And what's cool about that is that there's a really noticeable fade from top to bottom, but the halftone, the dark blue halftones, pops nicely against all of those colors in that gradient. So we kind of get the best of both worlds, where there's like a nice pop on the halftone, but still like a huge sense of depth as you move from light to dark in the background. Hello, Logical, welcome. All right, so yeah, I guess we just like finish with the halftones. I gotta remember to label my layers because I'm getting lost. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I've got this halftone brush set at 24, so I have to remember that, because if I use other halftone brushes in this set, I have to remember to also set them at 24 so all the dots stay the same size, or you get like really weird, like unwanted effects. So for example, I'm gonna go, right now I've got I'm gonna go to a less dense version of the same brush, but I gotta make sure to set it to 24 also, because I want the dots to blend. Yeah, so now when I'm using it, I get less dense dots because it's like a medium weight version of the halftone brush. But the dots are actually still the same size, so they like match up. They match up with the other dots, if that makes sense. So if I zoom way in, check this out. Like here's where I used the dense version, and here's where I'm using the slightly lighter version. The dots are still like matching up. You know what I mean? Like they're still the same size. So it's like a really, if you know how to use halftone brushes and you know how to manipulate the size of the dots, you can like start to get some really nuanced effects with them. They're much more powerful, I think, than people maybe realize. I'm a big advocate for halftone brushes, obviously. So drawing water is sort of weird because water is, there are obviously rules to how light and shadow work, but water is also like super choppy, especially like in a body of water that looks like this, like the open ocean. Water is super choppy on the surface. So even though I'm trying to obey some rules of light and dark, some of it is also just random, because if you think about the surface of like the ocean, there's so many different like shapes and peaks and little valleys and disturbances on the water that it's going to throw light in every direction. There's going to be random highlights and shadows in a bunch of places. So even though I'm sort of vaguely obeying the rule that it gets darker as it goes higher in the panel, I'm also just sometimes just tapping randomly to create kind of that like authentic sense of chaos in the water, if that makes sense. It's like I want to create the sense that it's like a choppy, dangerous body of water. You know what I mean? $400th member. Oh, nice. We're officially at 400 members in the Discord. Hell yeah. Let's go. I can't believe 400 people joined already. That's awesome. It's only been a Discord for like not even a month. All right, so back to our darker halftone brush. It looks like Lydia very cleverly, if I turn, here, let me turn off the, I'm going to paste white over top of all this color. So this is going to go back to what it looked like when Lydia delivered the line art to me. So I'm going to use just a white paint bucket. So this is the line art that Lydia delivered to me. So you can see that she put a shadow here on the surface of the water that represents their shadow as they're like flying over top. So I'm going to try to honor that by making this area pretty dark. Oops. So I'm just like trying to just follow her vision, you know what I mean? How do you get to this point of art? Oh man, it's just practice. I know that's like such a cliche answer, but it really is just practice. Like, it's like, while everybody else is not doing art, you spend your time doing art, and all those hours add up, you know what I mean? And like, eventually you get to be really good at it. You get to be an art god, you know? So this character here that's on the top is this character here. So she's predominantly green and purple. And this barbarian character kind of, I don't know. I haven't really been keeping a super strict palette for her. On this page alone, she's backlit here. So I made her purple. And then I made her blue. And then I made her kind of like purpley pink. So there's not really a rule for what color she is. I've got her purple here. You can see down here I was playing with her being orange. It's really like, I don't know, this whole sequence is very non-literal. It's like it takes place in a dream. So as long as I'm conforming to my palette over here on the left, I kind of just use whatever colors give me contrast in the moment. So I guess I'll just rough them in with the same palette that I used over here. Just for now. We can always change it. So we'll just go in. I like how... So this page is like this big, right? I know it's different for you on stream, but if I'm gonna size this page roughly as big as it would appear on the printed. So to me, I'm looking at my screen right about there. That's full size. Again, I know it looks different on stream, but bear with me. So this page is like this size when it gets printed, or when we deliver like the PDF version. If somebody buys the digital version, it's going to be this big, right? Obviously, this was hand drawn, and so there's like limitations to the amount of detail the human hand can do, right? But it doesn't matter because it's printed this big. But when I'm coloring this stuff, I have to zoom way, 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 way in, right? And people will show up in the comments and they'll be like, "Oh, your line art is so weird and like crunchy." I'm like, okay, well, we're zoomed in like 9 times more than you would ever see it. You know what I mean? Like, of course it looks weird. You're like, it's like looking at something under a microscope and being like, whoa, this looks totally different. Like, why does it look like this? And I always think that's funny because it's like, it looks absolutely as good as it needs to for the size that it's rendered. You know what I mean? And I love how people, like, I'm always doing these like videos where I show like, I go into like extreme detail about like little tiny parts of a panel, and I zoom in and I show like, here's some like decisions that we decided to make in this small nuanced portion. And people will be like, wow, her legs are different sizes. I'm like, well, okay, well, her legs are actually only like 0.001 inches difference from each other. You know what I mean? But people are like, people I guess don't realize that they're looking at stuff zoomed in, is my guess. And here too, like when I'm basically flatting her in, right? I'm really not getting too worked up over making this perfect, because again, when I zoom out, like it's gonna be tiny. It's just gonna be this little green shape on the page. I just noticed blue and orange are complementary color. Yeah, I mean that's this entire palette is a set of. Here, I'll move it. No, actually, I'm too afraid to move it because I want to make sure it goes back in the right spot, because it's like perfectly positioned under my head. on the stream. But if you look over here, this entire palette is based on complementary colors. So I always have the ability to, if I've got a blue background, I can put something orange over top. I always have the ability to make something pop. So there's a lot of like pinkish purples and greens and a lot of blues and oranges. It gives me the option to always have very visible contrast, very visible pop in everything that I do. That's sort of how it was designed. It actually looks kind of like it's based on primary colors, but it's really based around complementary colors and pairs that give me pop. Yeah, some people, it's weird. I think people don't understand that art is like an inherently messy process. Like if you're doing art correctly, you're only focused on the final outcome. The other thing I've noticed that people are like weird perfectionists about is like, if I cut a video of Lydia drawing a page like this, she's in like she's a working artist in like a studio that she spends a lot of her time. And so she's got like ink stains on the desk and like eraser shavings. Like of course she does, because she's working traditionally and she's like churning out a ton of art in a very messy medium. And people are like, ugh, like clean up your desk. There's ink stains on the desk. And I'm like, okay, well that person clearly has never worked in ink, because you would go insane trying to clean your desk every single time you got a tiny little bit of ink on it. You know what I mean? Like if anything, it's a self-report that those people don't work in ink enough, because if you actually are experienced, you kind of embrace that as part of the process, is that you kind of stain your workspace, or you have like little flecks of eraser from when you like erased out your pencil lines, you know, after you inked. Well, it's funny because, yeah, people who make pixel perfect line art, it's funny because the other thing people always say is like, how do you get such cool gritty line art? So it's like, well, you don't do it perfect. You know what I mean? Like you use ink on textured paper and you use like stuff that gives you this grit. So I just think it's funny because like half the comments are about how like everything is grungy and gross, and the other half are like, wait, how do you get such authentic looking lines? I just think it's really funny. Okay, so here, there's a lot of actually like cool shadows on this orange platform, so I'll try to get some of those in. It's like a lot of purpley, purple shadows and yellow highlights on these like sculptures on the orange platform, so I'm gonna try to get those in over here. Wait, except I have to remember where the light source is. So this is the fun part about making comics, is you have to match not just colors, but also like correct lighting directions and stuff like that. So this shadow on the left goes off to the left. This shadow, so there's shading under the, these are like D&D dice. They're like D&D dice sculptures in this temple. So the bottom of, what is this, like a D10, I think? D12? I can't remember. I used to play D&D, but I can't remember. I think this is a D12. So there's shading underneath it. It's casting a little bit of shadow here, and then there's like an orangey front to this. We also have this face that I'm coloring right now isn't visible in the page on the left. So we have to kind of like extrapolate what it would be. That's about right. It looks like I used this purple, but then I set the layer opacity a little lower. These two faces are in shadow. It's kind of casting a shadow on the platform here. And then this orangey color is this face of it. There you go. Again, just matching what I already did. Not trying to overthink it. Just trying to keep moving, you know what I mean? And then you just catch a glimpse of the shadow going off this way. Like that. Maybe just for fun we add like almost like when you have two light sources, you can get shadows going two different directions, so maybe we just do that. Just give it a little bit of like character. Lydia will do commissions, but it's rare. Right now she's like, I mean, you could message her. She's got her own website. I think it's just lydiarobotica.com. And like you could message her if you want a commission, but right now she's like pretty focused on working on interdimensional. But she's always down to do commissions of some kind, you know what I mean? But she's really good and very experienced, so I wouldn't expect her to charge you like new artist prices, you know what I mean? Fruity asks, what artists do you study from? Oh man. Well, for me, I've mentioned him before, but there's a colorist named Matt Hollingsworth, who's like, in my opinion, the best colorist working in comics right now. Matt Hollingsworth. He's like the person who kind of proved that comic coloring is absolutely an art form in its own right. I think he's helped a lot of people understand that colorists should be sort of viewed as an essential part of the comic creation team, you know what I mean? So he's one of my biggest influences. I think as far as other artists, Will Eisner, Jack Kirby, like I'm really into retro comics. So yeah, Will Eisner, Jack Kirby, and then a bunch of French and Belgian artists from the 70s and 80s, like Moebius, Hergé, the guy who did Tintin, is like a huge influence on me. Bill Watterson, who did Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes is like a really big influence on everything that we do. You can see it in that Bill Watterson was trained as like a classical cartoonist, where he actually understood how to do dip pen on paper, and he worked with India ink like in the old school way, but it was a lot of his stuff was colored. The Sunday strips were colored for newspapers, so they're really bright and vibrant. You can really see that kind of collision of like classic, really sophisticated line work and very bright colors in all of our stuff. So Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes, I mean, man, so many. As far as manga, I think Junji Ito is like one of my biggest influences. Junji Ito is a really big influence on this issue. Even stuff like this panel, which is like the eyeball panel, is that's very like, that feels like something he would do. It's very like it's like he's very into eyes and eyeballs, and he's very into like interesting weird narrative techniques, and like he spends a lot of time like on his world building. So having a inset panel that's an eye that gives you a detail of the environment feels very Junji Ito. All right, so for the reflection of the icebergs, it looks like I used like a light blue. So we'll put that in. I think I just cheated and I put, you can see how I didn't really like on the right here, I didn't really color the edge of the icebergs very precisely. And I think it's because I'm later going to cheat and go in with a white brush and just put those white caps in and just kind of like hide the bottom of it. Your brother's middle name is Hobbes? That's so awesome. That's so awesome. Dude, that's so cool. Why isn't my middle name Hobbes? Like, cause isn't like Hobbes is a historical figure, so it's not even that crazy. Like, it's a comic character's name, but it's a he's named after a historical figure, so it's not even that crazy to name someone that name. It's not like your middle name is like Beetle Bailey or something, like some other comic character from back in the day. You know, it's still like a cool name in addition to being a cool reference. I think it's awesome. All right, so we'll put some reflections for the icebergs in. Yeah, let's do that. Iceberg reflection. Oops, still on my halftone brush. I gotta go back to the regular brush. So again, like, I guess you asked about artists that inspired me. A lot of my brain was like programmed from a young age watching Bob Ross do landscapes. I don't know why, but like, I guess because I was just really young and my brain was like really switched on and like I was really paying attention, because you do when you're young, you like really absorb information like scarily well. And I have so many like very distinct memories of things that Bob Ross did that I still do to this day. And one of them is like doing these kinds of like reflections of objects in water, the like darker mirrored version of the shape. Okay, so that looks bad, but check this out. That's when we're going to flip through blending modes and find the right one. That one's a little saturated. Hang on. Yeah, I like that. It's a little dark up here, so I like how it looks down here. It's a little dark up here, so I'm just gonna like take a little bit of the edge off of it with a semi-opaque brush. Yeah, it's okay. Cool. Let's add some. I think I'm gonna do the white caps just so I get a sense of like how this panel's actually gonna look when it's done. All right, thanks Ginger Snaps. Thanks for being here. Yeah, let me do some white caps. Which we'll put as a layer at the very top. I'll set the brush to like 50%. And we'll just go in and paint. Just paint in those like breaking waves, you know what I mean? And the rule is that when you're doing this kind of breaking water, the rule is that it's the foam, the whitest part of a breaking wave, that sort of like foam, is going to be at the edge that's colliding with the object. So I'm just going to put it across basically wherever water, the top of a wave meets an object, that's going to be the lightest part of this kind of like breaking water effect. And then you can kind of fade it off near the bottom. And then I like to just like, maybe I need a little bit. Let me do like 60%. And then I like to just click and put little dots. It's like the spray breaking, you know what I mean? And I'm going to use that white to cover up the edge of where I didn't really define the edge of the column when it touches the water. So I'm kind of hiding it a little bit. And then when I zoom out, again, it's not the most detailed thing. Anybody who's like an actual landscape painter would say that that's like not even close to being finished. But again, you have to remember that this is appearing really small on the page. So it just kind of needs to suggest what's happening versus be like super detailed. It's enough, you know what I mean? Like as a comic colorist, you got to like work quickly and keep moving. I'll go back in and I'll refine it, but it's already close, you know what I mean? And I'm just going to do that at the base of every object here. Every column, every like little iceberg, just kind of try to hide that I didn't do a good job of defining the bottom of these by putting like white caps of like breaking water. And Lydia did a nice job of like actually drawing in little waves breaking, so I kind of know exactly where to go. I don't think I'm able to talk about comics because I've never read or made one. Well, you know, the good news is you can become a comic fan tomorrow or today, because all you have to do is just buy or go to the library. I also, by the way, recommend the library to everybody. I think people are concerned that comics are really expensive. Like it's hard to be a comic fan because it's expensive. But luckily my generation, the millennial generation, has like fully taken over running libraries of the world. It seems like, because if you go to any public library or any school library, like they have made sure to order really good comics and manga and graphic novels for the collection. So if you're interested in like becoming a comic fan and you don't have a lot of money, for example, like go to the library. It's amazing. I'm actually like really excited when I go to the library and I see the quality of comics chosen for those collections. Like you can tell that people who really care make those decisions, like run the library and have ordered like, you know, like actual stuff that real comic fans like, you know what I mean? So you can easily join the pantheon of comic fans by going to the library. All right, so the one thing that I don't love about what I'm doing is that it looks like a little chunky down here at the bottom, right? So the water breaks up top here, and then it kind of like stays really white and chunky down here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is, to make that more of a seamless blend, is I'm going to go over it with a light blue color. So I'll just take some of the like edge off of it, literally. So now it kind of fades up nicely to that. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So there's, here, I'll show you before and after. There's before, where it stays really white all the way down, and then there's after, where it kind of like fades up into that white cap. So it looks a little bit more, I mean, it doesn't look realistic, but it looks a little bit less abrupt. It just helps it feel a little bit less like, it helps take away the sense that I just took my brush and just like hacked it in, which is what I did, but now I'm kind of like saving it a little bit, making it look a little more nuanced. But as I'm going back in space, the watercolor is getting more purple. It's getting darker, so I might need to use a different color to do this. So I'll use a purple. And just take the edge off. There you go. And again, this panel is a little bit different than, I'm doing this top left panel a little bit differently than I would do this big panel. This big panel is bigger, obviously. It's much more detailed. This one, I just need to kind of like suggest stuff because it's on the page. It's actually really small. It doesn't need to be like crazy detailed. A lot of comic coloring is just kind of making the decision of where you're going to invest your time. You know what I mean? It's okay. There's something kind of like, it still doesn't feel like developed enough. I think I just need to go in with a little bit more color variation in the water. How did I do it on some of these other pages? Like this panel, for example. Oh, okay. So this one's got an extra layer of shading. So if you look at the water here and I turn off the halftone, I just have to find the layer. Okay, yeah. So it was kind of like a blue color, and then I went in with this shading. And you can see it kind of looks ugly. Like you can see I had my brush set to like 50% opacity or something. And I was just like layering these kind of like brush strokes over, which it doesn't look that good. Like they just look like a bunch of like gross C-shaped things. And then when you put the halftone over top of it, it sort of hides all of that. And what you're left with is like, you still get the shading, but the halftone kind of hides the uglier, brush strokes that were in there. And you do need that shading because like without the shading it's just kind of like a mass of dark blue halftone on top of light blue. Those two work together really well. So I'll try to bring some of that sense into this panel. Yeah, Moebius. Yeah, Enki Bilal. Enki Bilal is a huge influence on us. Lydia has the, what is it, the Nicopol trilogy hardback that I don't even know if that's in, her version is in print anymore, but she's talked about it, and Lydia has shown like some of her favorite comics, and Enki Bilal, the Nicopol trilogy, is like on her list. We're really into, I feel like everybody is always arguing over manga versus Western comics, like American comics. Nobody ever brings the Belgians or the French into the fight, and we're definitely champions for them. Yeah, and like Moebius is really, a lot of people don't know Moebius, but they do. You know what I mean? Like Moebius is super important in the development of like the movie The Fifth Element. Like it's basically the Moebius movie. It's not, but it is. Like it's clearly the kind of world building that Moebius was doing in, you know, the 70s and 80s that just sort of ported over to a Hollywood film. But if you like The Fifth Element, at all, or Aeon Flux or any of those, then definitely check out Moebius, because he's kind of like one of the most important artists of all time. And if you're a Marvel fan, Moebius did a Silver Surfer graphic novel that's just like absolutely incredible. It's like one of the best, probably one of the best interpretations of that character. And it's because they kind of gave him a little bit of free reign to do his own thing. I think it was like an actual graphic novel, so it didn't, at the time, it didn't have to like fit into the canon of the character, I think. All right, so you can see how I did these like big stripes to kind of create the sense that these columns are that if you've got like a row of columns like this, there's going to be light and dark patterns that are reflected into the water. So this will just help me get a little bit more depth into the panel. But I also don't want them to continue all the way down, so I'm just going to fade them off as they go down a little bit. Yeah, that's cool. Now all of a sudden that like helps a lot. Like the difference between before those stripes and after is like I get that extra sense of development and depth in the panel. Yeah, Scavenger's Reign is awesome. Scavenger's Reign is totally, you can tell that Scavenger's Reign is totally like people who are trying to do heavy metal, like the heavy metal movie for a modern audience. So it's like super Moebius, super like Richard Corbin is another artist that I think inspired that series. Yeah, all the headgear in that is super Moebius. You're right, Jeremiah. What up? Your username is a boy is invisible. That sounds like a emo band from 2008. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as a compliment. A boy is invisible sounds like a band that they'd sell shirts of at Hot Topic in 2006 or 2008. All right, we're getting there. I do think that the best thing that this panel got was these stripes. I was getting a little worried about how flat the ocean looked. Like it just kind of looked like, it didn't look like water. And then all of a sudden you throw this kind of like reflective bars in it, and it actually looks really much more sophisticated, which makes me feel better. Okay. Let's work on the columns. I don't know why, but I feel like the columns should have like purple shading on them, just to differentiate them a little bit. So maybe we just like, I think we go in and we just like obey. Lydia's kind of shown us through line work like where these are kind of like old stone columns. They're like pockmarked and weathered. So I think we just go in and we obey that idea a little bit. That there's these like pockmarked stone columns, you know what I mean? Now it is a little tricky because there's also, we'll do this as a layer too, but there's like a wave, there's waves breaking on this column, and she's actually drawn in that there's like, because right, this line right here, this like S-shaped line right here, that's not, I'm pretty sure that's not the top of a wave breaking. That's like the water that's left by a wave that's receding. So there's actually like some nuance to how these columns are done. So I'm going to try to add some texture, but I'm going to also try to get some blue kind of patterns that match this line work that's sort of like the wave receding, if that makes sense. And again, this is not that, I'm really zoomed in, so I have to be careful I don't overdo the detailing. This is not that big on the page. So I just have to not overdo it, just get like suggest in some detail, you know what I mean? Maybe a little halftone. Let's try a halftone on it. Let me go to a halftone brush. Dare we use a vertical line halftone? How does that look? Oh man, that's wild. I don't know. I'm gonna try it in orange. Let's make it smaller. Let's go to like 20, 30 scale. 28. Oh man, I don't know. That might not work. Hang on. There's something interesting here. It might work. Liners. Nope. Classic halftones. This is a brush set from True Grit Texture Supply. It's like a one of my absolute favorite companies on the planet. They make like really good brushes. And they have I think it's called Beat Tones, B-E-A-T, Beat Tones. Really sophisticated like halftone brushes, and you can like, they come with lines and dots and like cross hatching and everything. It's really cool. It's pretty cool. It definitely adds something. I don't know. I might be getting too finicky because again, this is not that big on the page, but it definitely adds like some texture to these and makes them feel more polished. Let me try again. Let's just do it on the edges. Like that is pretty cool. If you just like give the edge of the column some character, and then you can fade it off a little bit. Wait, let me do it on all of these. All right, we're not done yet. So okay, so what I am going to do is I'm going to go further than I want with the halftone. And then I'm going to use a mask to paint some of it away, just to get some interesting effect. Create a sense of like that it's round, you know what I mean? By erasing the halftone in the front, it'll feel like the shadow is wrapping around that like round column, you know what I mean? It's cool. It's subtle, but it adds a lot. It just is like a quick trick to make it feel like I did something to it, you know? I haven't read Tokyo Ghoul. I've read a lot of manga, but I've never read Tokyo Ghoul, nor have I watched the adaptation. All right, this panel's getting there. It's getting there. Yeah, it's a weird effect. This is a small panel, but this is actually the closest we ever get to one of these columns. So I wanted to put a little bit of texture on. Like, I know that's weird, but like, this is, I think, even though this is a small panel, this is the biggest we ever see one of these columns up close. So I just wanted to put a little bit of extra texture on it, you know? All right, let's go in with some more. Let's work on the water. All right, bye, Drago. Drago. Thank you for being here. So I'm shading a lot using multiply, which, you know, different people will have different opinions on. If I use multiply, I do it to get extra contrast, because when you set a layer to multiply, it darkens it down a little bit. So some people are opposed to it, some people embrace it. I don't really have a problem with using multiply as long as you're not overdoing it, you know what I mean? So I'm just using it here to kind of like add more depth to the water, create more of a sense of that it's choppy, you know what I mean? That it's like a living, intense ocean. So I'm just trying to like find the areas that Lydia has kind of marked out in the line work and just add a little bit of extra depth to them, you know. There you go. What canvas size do I use? We work at I don't know. It doesn't really. I don't know that this will be helpful because we actually print at like an unusual size. We work at 11 by 14, and then we print at what's called magazine size. Here, I've got the layer on. 8 by 10 and a half. So we make comics that are like oversized compared to normal American comics or manga. We make, yeah, it's called magazine size, 8 by 10 and a half. It's the size of the old like heavy metal magazine or Savage sort of Conan. Like there were a lot of like magazine size comics in the 70s and 80s. So we work at 11 by 14 and it gets taken down to 8 by 10 and a half. But you can just Google like standard page size for different comics and you can set your file up that size. So if I turn off the halftone, you can see, yeah, I think I need to actually shade the water without the halftone on so I can really get a sense of like what I'm affecting, you know? I think otherwise you lose exactly what you're doing. The halftone does a nice job of hiding some things, but sometimes it can, if you leave it on, you can kind of like lose track of where your light and dark areas are. Alright, so we also need some highlights. So let me go in and put some water highlights on here. I'm just going to use a white. I'll set it to like 50%. And I got to zoom out for this one so I get it right. And this is not about precision. It's about kind of like getting the feeling right. Let's go to 40% on the brush. So we'll do anywhere where there's like a do this. So I'm mostly doing horizontal lines, but I'm also sort of following the like anywhere that there's like a peak in the ocean that Lydia's drawn, I'm kind of obeying that too. And I'm going to try to make it lighter. I'm going to do like clusters of highlights. Anywhere I do a cluster of highlight, I'm going to try to make it like lighter in the middle and kind of create the sense that it like fades off on the edges. Again, this is kind of like an old school Bob Ross technique. I feel like he did this a lot. He would take like a white brush and just kind of go horizontal lines and just create like, again, reflections are not precise. They're very much about creating a feeling. And then I got to take the opacity down on them. And there you go. That sort of creates the sense that like those bars have a little bit of extra texture to them. And then maybe we need a unifying layer. So there's a lot of lights and darks. It's getting a little busy, so I'm going to try to find a color that can kind of like take some of the edge off of all of this. It's like I spent a lot of time adding light and dark and texture and value, and now it's time to kind of smooth it over at the very end, just because, again, this is a small panel. I don't want it to be too distracting. That's kind of nice. It gives it a little bit of a smoothness, you know what I mean? Like it takes some of the harshness away on the edges of those halftones. It's not bad. It's pretty good. Maybe a little bit less. It's subtle. Yeah, that's nice. See how it like, I know it's subtle, I hope you can see that, but like see how it goes from those dark halftones are very blue and very intense, and it kind of like knocks them back a little bit. It just smooths it over, and all of a sudden it kind of feels like a nice single surface of water. You know what I mean? Do you think that raster layers... That's a good question. Do you think that raster layers are superior to vector layers for making manga? I mean, you can... I would discourage you from trying to do colors in vector, because it would take you... Vector is a much slower process. You have to actually like manually define shapes, and your computer can start to slow down really badly if you've got a lot of like stacked color layers. Raster is just fast. Like raster is faster. That's kind of the rule. Like it's easier to work. It's easier to process files. It's easier to export. I have sometimes heard about people doing line art as vector, but even then, like a lot of the line art that we do is intentionally kind of like chunky and grungy, and it's like really hard to get this kind of like chunky, gritty effect in vector. So I mean, I guess you could do it in vector, but I don't really know why. As long as you're working high enough resolution, like there's almost no reason to work in vector. Like if you're working in a really high res raster file, it's going to print and reproduce fine. You know what I mean? Like vector is usually reserved for things that you would need to really, like maybe if you're working on like a banner or a poster or something, like something really big, you'd have to print at like a really large size. I wonder if we need a little bit of like non-literal... I think we need something around them, because these figures are getting lost for sure in all the detail of the water. So I think we need something around them that like makes them pop here. That could just be like a soft glow like this. It's one of those things where when you know it's there, you see it, but when you don't, if I didn't tell you that I had put an extra glow there, you might not even notice, but it just helps them pop, you know what I mean? Like it gives them a little bit of a defined edge around them. We could even, like, because they're flying, we could create like a little bit of sense of like magic glow around them. Here, I'll show you. Like we could take another color and really get them to pop. Like I could put a halftone brush on yellow, and like literally outline them in like magical dust, and not only will it kind of create the sense that there's like a spell around them that's allowing them to fly, it'll also give them like a pop from the background, which is pretty cool. go to like a little bit denser. I'll go to 20% scale. Oh, this might be unnecessary. I might not do this actually, but it can create kind of a sense that they're glowing, which is like kind of a nice like magical sense. I don't know, it's all right. I don't really know that this adds much, to be honest. Because like you would do this like trail coming off of them here. It could just be white. It's not bad. I don't know. I don't like it. Let's just try it without a halftone. Maybe we just give them a little bit of like a trail coming off of them, like motion lines, you know what I mean? Just like a little whoosh coming off of there. I mean, Lydia drew it in the line art, so we can try to get it in there. It's like a very cartoony thing, the whoosh, the white whoosh coming off of somebody who's flying, but it might also help define them a little bit from the background. It'll help you see the details in things like her antlers too, you know? She's got this really cool like deer skull helmet on, and this kind of provides a nice background for it. Yeah, I actually like that. I like that more than I expected. Again, it's very cartoony, but it helps create separation. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, the green is not really the final. So the green is also probably not a good color for her. This character who's called the Spirit, she's actually like not always green. Sometimes she's purple. You can see it here in this one, like a purpley pink. So maybe just for this panel, we'll make her pop in. The green is probably too close to the blue anyway, so we'll make her pop with some pink. Maybe like this color. Yeah, that helps a lot. I mean, we could just make her whole. I do like when she's two-toned. It's pretty cool, but that green's tough. That green is not the most poppy color. You can go to this. We have an alt color in our palette, so we could do that. That might help her pop a little bit. And then if she's two-tone, maybe the other character's two-tone too, just so it doesn't look like she's flat next to the other one. So we'll just do like a slightly different orange. Or even yellow. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, now they pop a little bit more. That's nice. Yeah, that's a more yellow. That's a more yellow-green. The other green had a little bit more blue in it. It's cool. All right, so this one is coming along. It needs. Let's go really dark. Let's not be afraid of purple up in the top left here. Oh, I see. So I put that kind of like blue to smooth it over, but it actually took away the darkness in the top left. So I'm going to erase some of that out, because I really want there to feel like there's a shadow back here. It's cool. Yeah, it's getting there. What's missing in this panel is the icebergs. They're really flat right now. They need some extra detail. All right. Well, I've been drinking coffee nonstop all morning, so I'm taking a bathroom break. I'll be right back. I'm here. Give me 1 sec. I'll be right back. This is literally a 2-minute bathroom break, thanks to multiple cups of coffee to wake myself up. I'll be back. Oh, that's better. I gotta be honest, I had to pee so bad, and I'm like staring at like water. I'm like coloring water. It was like getting really bad. So, but I'm back now, and I got a Cliff Bar. Shout out Cliff Bar, not sponsored, but if you'd like to be sponsored, you know, call me. Nobody ever hits us up for, I feel like we have a lot of followers now, and nobody ever hits us up for like sponsorships, and it makes me sad. It makes me wonder what I'm doing wrong. Like, honestly, Cliff Bar. Wait, here's my, okay, wait. This is my attempt to get a sponsorship from Cliff. Ready? Sustained energy. Oatmeal, raisin, walnut for sustained energy. Why does nobody call me? Okay. So the only danger with this page overall, I've like pushed the darks really far on this panel in the top left, but when you zoom out, it's this big panel drops off to like a darker purple up top, up here. And the danger is that these two colors are starting to get too similar. So you kind of lose the gutter here. So I have a choice. I can either try to lighten the top of this left panel, or I can like be less committed to going to dark purple in the big panel. I just need to create, I think it's important that the gutters of panels kind of like stand out so it's very clear what the page layout is. So I don't know, man. This is tricky. Maybe the secret is not to go so dark on the big panel. Or it's to go more like purple so that it stands out from the blue. Yeah. That's nice. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's cool. That's definitely the secret. So, all right. Again, as a ton of what you do as a comic colorist is not just thinking about contrast between objects in the same panel. It's about creating contrast on the page overall and making sure that these panels pop off of the background. And a lot of what Lydia does is, instead of having traditional comic layouts where there's white gutters, she does like a big dominant panel and then floats panels on top of it. So you have to make sure that the gutters stand out a little bit. So I'm gonna push the gutter to this kind of like redder purple, and then that really helps these two panels, which are gonna be really blue, kind of like stand out from the background. I also just really like that effect now on this big panel, where it goes from like light blue to medium blue to dark blue to purple to like really reddish, like almost like burgundy purple. It's really cool. I'm going to bring that over into the background over here on the right too. Then it feels like the panels, the big panel has more contrast from the panels that sit on top of it, but there's like also just a richness and more colors of the rainbow on the page overall. So I really like that. Yeah, it's really hard. If you have to go to the bathroom, it's really hard to take a break if your brain is not ready to take a break. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that's really good for my bladder health to just like sit here and be like, I have to finish this panel. There's another thing we can do on the water, because it's so weird. Like, I want this panel on the top left to feel like there's choppy water, but if I make it too choppy, then it's distracting. So it's this weird balance of like, you want the motion of the water to feel choppy, but you don't want the panel to feel like way too busy. If you draw water too choppy, it gets way too busy. So you kind of like constantly want to be adding light and dark and then evening it out so that it doesn't distract from the figures. One thing we can do is actually to do my favorite thing, which is to paint over top of the line art. So I'm going to just affect the line art. I've got a clipping mask clipped into the line art layer. Here, I'll label it line art. And I can actually use blue to kind of like, oh, I'm on the wrong layer. Oh God. I can use the brush to just affect the line art layer. And that'll help even it out a little bit. So you have to be really careful with this. I'm just going to use a really big brush set to really soft, and I'm just going to click once or twice. 3 times? Okay. And then so now I've got kind of like, if I turn it on and off, you can see that I've got like a blue color that's knocking back that line art a little bit. I'm going to now erase it out from the figures. So their lines are no longer covered up with the blue, so they're back to going pure black, and then they'll pop really well. And that's like a super interesting way to get, you can see how now the characters having pure black lines on them immediately pop from the lines that have like a little bit of blue on them, which is pretty cool. So you can just see how like that blue kind of like knocks everything back, it evens it out, but it further enhances the pop of those characters. That helps a lot. It's subtle, but it helps a lot. Cliff Bar, sponsor me. Don't you want me, Cliff Bar, don't you want me to make chewing noises into the microphone for you? Don't you think that'll sell more Cliff Bars? All right, how did I do the icebergs last time? Oh, nice. Okay, so I've just used a halftone brush to do the shading, and then there's highlights. So just some highlight layers on the edges of the ice here, and then a halftone brush. Let me get the right color. Okay, yeah, it's this cyan color. So we can do that. Just do some quick shading passes on these. I do like that there's a little platform where you can see like, this is the crazy level of detail that Lydia puts in stuff. There's like the penguin and there's like the two penguins having a soda on the platform of the ice right here. There's so many details like that. There's also like there's a flying penguin over here. Oh, there's like a dragon, like a sea serpent going through the water down here. And then like, is this a little city with like Godzilla attacking him? I think so. Oh yeah, it's like Mothra. It's like a little tiny like cityscape. And I think this is Mothra and Godzilla destroying it. So that's fun. There's like so many details on this page. All right, so we'll just get a another halftone brush, and we'll do the same thing where we like set it to we'll set it to like pretty small. Yeah, because like that dot pattern is a little too big. See how big those dots are? So I'm gonna just go to my brush settings. Normally I keep this brush settings panel open because it's annoying to have to open it every time. I'll move it over here. But when I'm on stream, I'm trying to like maximize the amount of like screen space I can show so that there's not like, because it's kind of annoying to if you guys are watching and there's panels covering the screen. So that's why I keep having to open the brush settings. So yeah, let me just shade the edges of the iceberg here. I'm gonna get really, I'm just gonna chunk in the shading, and then I'll go back in and refine it with the eraser. And there's a little platform where the penguins are standing, so we'll kind of shade that in for them. Leave that platform light so that it looks like a surface they can stand on. A little bit of extra shading detail. Oh, nice, yeah. Does Toho do, are they their own comic publisher? M? Like, do they? I'm assuming they are, right? Like, because they still have the rights to Godzilla, so I'd assume that they do more than just movies, right? Like, they're their own comic publisher. I kind of want the edge. That actually looks pretty good. Let's see what it looks like if I like erase out, like create some rim lighting on the edge of the ice here. M, you're like M is a really good. Oh, they collab with IDW. Yeah, it's weird. Like Toho's whole thing is like they still have the rights to Godzilla, right? But they like if they make a movie, they collaborate with a studio. If they make a comic, they sounds like they collaborate with a publisher. But yeah, M, you're like a really good comic colorist, so I'm very intimidated that you're watching right now because you actually are probably like, I can't believe he's doing that. Yeah, so I just did the rim lighting effect where I like erased out the edge of the shading on the iceberg here. It really helps. It creates like, just again, that little extra sense of pop. Pardon me while I just like house the Cliff Bar on stream. All right, I had to use the kill switch on my mic so people couldn't hear me chewing. All right, so I'm just gonna put some like highlights on the icebergs. Nothing crazy. I just want to create like enough to create a sense of depth. And I'm just kind of coming up with the idea that the lighting is coming from the left. Yeah, that's nice. It definitely feels like developed enough to work at this size. And we'll go in and we'll fix the water, because the water needs some more detail. Yeah, that makes sense. They collab with IDW. Toho collaborates with IDW, and they get like final approval and everything. I wonder what it's like to be a writer. I'm assuming you. I don't know how much contact you had with the rest of the creative team, but I want to know what it's like to be a writer on the Godzilla stuff. Like, how much are you just like essentially like carrying out someone else's vision of like, have they already decided the plot and the story beats and stuff? Because it's like it's a whole franchise, right? Like you must be like kind of at the whim of the actual kind of architects of the Godzilla universe, right? Like, I wonder if that's a rewarding experience or if that's like not that fun. I don't know. Although if anybody from IDW is watching, I'd love to take a stab at writing whatever you tell me to write for Godzilla. All right, maybe we come back to this panel. I say this all the time. Every time I stream, I say this, but the danger is that you get too lost in making one panel like look a certain way, and you kind of forget to develop the other stuff on the page. So maybe I need to switch gears and like work on another panel so that I don't get too in the weeds on this and kind of like lose track of what the overall page composition is, you know what I mean? Yeah, let's do that. So there's a kind of like a mist hanging over the panel here. You can see Lydia drew like the lines for mist in this one. They continue down here too. So we're gonna have to figure out how to handle that. All right, maybe we'll work on the big panel. I think it would be good to get some like detailing and halftones going on in the water here, so we really know kind of like what this panel, how this panel's look affects the composition overall. So on this one, it's a lot of white columns that fade back to purple. It's got this yellow beam of light in the back that we have to do over here. We're literally just replicating what's happening over here on the left. All right, yeah, let's do that. We'll get some columns in. Let's do that. We'll start with the columns. That'll ground me a little bit and help me understand like what I'm doing. I do like where this page or where this panel is going up on the top left, but part of it still feels like too busy to me. So I gotta figure out how to fix that. So I'm gonna switch gears and work on this big panel. Oh yeah, covers usually get done months before interiors, so they can be included in previews, yeah. All right. So the trick with this panel is going to be keeping the columns from being too big. Everything on this page is so detailed in the line art that the trick is going to be not being overly detailed in the colors, if that makes sense. Because if you obey the line art faithfully, you might actually end up with way too busy of a page. I know that sounds weird, but that's like an actual danger when you're working with a line artist this detailed. So a lot of it is going to be figuring out how to suggest some stuff in the background without defining every single shape. What I am going to do for all these columns in the foreground, I am going to get them in really precisely. So these are like these really cool columns Lydia designed that are like there's kind of like these soldiers or gods or something, like holding these swords downward. They're like standing at attention with these long swords that go in the water. So the first row of these columns, this front row here, I'm going to do them all. And then the ones that are back in space, I'm going to kind of like suggest it in. You can see how I did it here, where the first row is this like white color that I was very, very like defined on. But then here, we'll do a line check. I post about this all the time. If you turn the lines off, you can see that past this first row of columns, it really just becomes like vague brush strokes to kind of suggest that there are other vertical forms there. So that when the lines are on, you get a sense of depth. You get a sense that there's this like front row of columns. You get a sense that there's many more, but I didn't try to go in there and paint them all exactly because that would just like break your eyes. Like it would be way too much to look at. It would probably hurt your eyes. So we're going to kind of try to replicate that same technique where when you turn the lines off, you can see it's actually like very vague in the background. You really don't need a lot. And that'll also save us like a lot of time. Because otherwise, the other danger with a page like this is that you can spend days trying to shade all of this stuff, and then you can't, finish the whole comic. yeah, I'm just trying to get this front row in first. Yeah, I guess layers are like a personal preference thing, right? I use a lot of layers out of like the paranoia that I'm going to want to like have the flexibility to affect them afterwards, like after the fact. Like I use a lot of layers. I make every time I add a new anything, I just put it on a new layer. But the truth is, like, I very rarely actually, I probably could be working all on like 3 layers because I very rarely actually go in and adjust individual things. I think it's just out of paranoia, to be honest. Like I really don't need a lot of layers, but I'm just so scared that for some reason I'd want to go change something later. But I really don't. I mean, I really, like, a lot of what I'm doing, I probably could, this could all probably be on one layer and it would be fine. Because you can also use like the magic wand tool to grab a color. Like so much of my coloring is based around like making sure things pop from each other, which also would make it easier to just like use the magic wand tool to just grab a color and affect it later if I had to. Like it doesn't necessarily need to be on its own layer, but I'm paranoid. But yeah, as I'm putting these columns in, if anybody has any questions about comics related or unrelated to coloring, let me know. Now's a good time because we're kind of in autopilot mode right now as we try to figure out what shape Lydia had in mind for some of these columns. It's tricky. Lydia's so detailed, but part of her strength as an artist is that she also knows how to kind of like make things, how do I say this? The word that we use all the time is suggest. Like that's like the artistic term for like, if you're gonna, she's suggested these columns as they move back in space. Like you can see like they become less and less obvious where the edges of them are, which creates this like kind of wonderful painterly style where it's not overworked and over detailed. The detail is there, but it's not like every shape is defined, which is a really nice balance between it blending into the background and having the sense of detail. Because she's so good at suggesting detail in the background, it also makes it hard sometimes to know exactly where the edges of things are when I'm trying to color them, you know, like, and that's why you see me like constantly zooming in and out, because I'm constantly trying to like zoom out and get a sense of where I actually am. Because if I'm too zoomed in, I get confused about like what line I'm supposed to be coloring. You know what I mean? So this line goes all the way up. Oh, I see. It's this one. Yeah, here's the column edge. Yeah, that looks right. Oh, I missed one. There's a really big... So the layout of this temple is there's basically like a right angle where the columns like turn. So we've got columns in the foreground down this row here, but there's also columns in the foreground on this side, so I have to make sure I color those. Let me call this layer column layer 1. So it's this right here. It's so cool. I mean, the depth of this panel is really cool. That's my main concern is preserving that sense of depth. Like making sure that you really get a sense of how far back into space these go. You know what I mean? And so having that front row of columns be really bright is a really good cheat to do that, because it creates a lot of variance of light and dark, and that variance of light and dark allows you to kind of like create a sense of depth as the columns go back in space and get darker and darker. There's also like essentially a lensing effect, like a lens warp. So you can see as the columns move back into space, there's kind of like a curve to the perspective. And that's like a really cool cheat to create a sense of depth. Like, you know, it was taken with a lens that actually distorts a little bit, like a little bit of a fisheye effect. Two layers max for everything when coloring. I don't know. I mean, there's no wrong way, but that makes me nervous. Like, I will say that the program, it does get confused. Like, I get confused about where I am if I use too many layers, so that part I get. But the program doesn't have a limit to layers. And so my policy is always like, hey, you know, they put layers in the program for a reason. You should use them. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason not to use layers because they put them in there for a reason and they didn't cap them. You can have as many as you want. So as long as you're not confusing yourself, I say use as many as you want because it gives you that much more flexibility. What would you say to someone who is a first-time comic writer who feels anxious about putting their writing out there? I would say that if you actually think about, I think that if you're a writer, you worry that your writing is going to be perceived as you. How do I say that? Like, you worry, if you're a comic writer or a writer of any kind and you write a story, I think you're worried that you're going to, like, you know, show the world something about yourself that may be embarrassing to reveal or you may want to keep hidden. But I would say most people, when they consume writing, like a novel or a story, very rarely do they... I don't know. Think about how often you read a book or a story and you think about what it means for the author's personality. Like, very rarely, most people take writing at surface value. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't think most people are actually thinking constantly about, like, what does this tell me about the author? What does this tell me about unless you're a very studied author. I think most people are going to perceive it as the story and won't pass judgment on you as a person in how they receive the work, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. But I realized like, oh no, like, people are going to think I'm completely out of my mind if I write this weird story. And I don't think a lot of people are going to be doing that level of critical thinking where they think that my work reflects on me and they're not going to Google me because the story is weird. They're just going to think like, oh, that was a really weird story. People are more forgiving than you think in that way. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to judge you. They're going to judge your writing as a story. And so you don't have to worry about kind of like the judgment of your work passing on to you, because most people are able to separate the artist and the writing, if that makes sense. The author and the writing. It's the same thing, like, I always tell people if they're making social media content that you actually have very little to fear putting yourself out there, because if it's bad, people won't watch it, and that will make it not get boosted by an algorithm. So you have nothing to lose. You know what I mean? Like, if your work is bad, algorithms make it so that it actually decreases the chance that your stuff will get seen. Usually only the good stuff gets kind of like viewed all the way through, which trips the algorithm to show it to more people. So you have almost nothing to lose taking a risk in putting yourself out there, because if it's bad or embarrassing, the chances are actually low that it would get spread around. You usually only go viral nowadays if something is good. So you might as well try a bunch of times to see what you can kind of like get to stick, if that makes sense. Yeah, this is cool. The front layer of columns really helps create a sense of depth as you move back into space. I like it a lot. So this is the last column in this row that I'm going to define, and then I'm going to let the rest be a little bit more like suggested, and we'll do them in more of like a painterly style, not with like a marquee tool defining the edges. And I've colored enough of Lydia's work that I actually kind of, I actually kind of know what, I actually kind of know like where the edges of things are, you know what I mean? Hang on. I got quick mask mode on. I hate that. Oh, Photoshop. I've got channels on. Hang on. I accidentally went into quick mask mode. That's something that like Photoshop is wild, man. If you actually start to like learn about channels, you can do some really crazy stuff. Like I can turn so I'm working in CMYK. So I can actually, these are the if you were going to get this printed, these are actually the channels that the printer would use. Like so I can actually turn the cyan channel off, and you can see what it would look like if you just printed this in magenta, yellow, and black. Or I can turn so that when the printer prints this, that's what it would look like if they just did the yellow channel, or just did the magenta channel, or just did the cyan channel. And if you actually know if you know about printing and 4-color process, and you can set up your files in really cool ways so that you can just print the cyan channel, or the magenta channel, or the yellow channel. It's pretty cool. Anyway, there's some really cool stuff you can do if you actually know the process, but it's tough. It's very complicated. Yeah, you can get in and out of it with Q, but there's also like other stuff going on with my channels that from when these files were set up that I had to make sure I didn't mess up. All right, so yeah, I mean, my friend prints t-shirts and actually uses halftone brushes, but then delivers the files to the printer as plates, as like the cyan plate, the magenta plate, the yellow plate. Like, it's pretty cool. So they can replicate the colors exactly using his halftone patterns in 4 screens, in 4 different. They just literally do a cyan screen, a magenta screen, a yellow screen, and a black screen, and then the shirts come out full color because he's actually built the files with just cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. It's cool. So now if I go in with a semi-transparent brush, I can start to get some of these other columns in. What I liked about how I did it on this panel is that they're a little bit blue in the background. Like if I turn the line art layer off, like you see how the columns in the background are kind of based on this like sky blue. I kind of want to replicate. I really like the sense of depth that that gives, where there's actually like quite a lot of color variation in the columns. So let me turn this layer. Let me figure out how I did that. Okay, so it literally is just, I just put like a sky blue pattern on it and then just did a semi, it looks like 40% white brush just to suggest vertical shapes in there. It's pretty good. I like it. I'm surprised I was able to go that far on the blue. It really is just a sky blue. All right, so we got to do that, because that helps it feel like it's not too dark. Yeah, I like that effect a lot. So just in the background, if we put it here, yeah, just a little bit of extra blue. Although, yeah, this panel works a little bit differently. Let's try it. Set my brush to like, yeah, 40, I think I'll go 40%. And I'll just try to like, this is a more, sometimes comic coloring is very precise, like you're filling in a coloring book and you're like hitting the lines exactly with very precise shapes. And sometimes you're doing more like, you're an oil painter and you're kind of like suggesting the shapes in. So in this case, this is a little bit more painterly, what I'm doing, where I'm just kind of going in a little bit less precise, and I'm just hitting the front ones a few more times with the brush to get them lighter than the others. And then I'm going to reduce the layer overall. So they're not, no column is ever going to be as bright as the very, very front ones, because I've got the layer set to like 65%. We're just going to go in and, again, just kind of like pretend like we're doing a painting, so it's less precise, and just get some lines in there. And this will create the sense that there's like kind of stacked up layers of columns. And anytime I accidentally go over the water, I'll just literally switch to the eraser and just clean it up. But again, I'm not trying to be super precise. I'm just trying to create the sense of there are shapes there, and you might not be able to read them exactly, but this way you'll know something's there. Your eye won't spend too long looking at it, and it'll just create a nice sense of depth overall. Oh yeah, I'd say one of the most common questions people ask us is about getting like, hey, can you give me your uncolored pages so I can, practice coloring? And I think what we should do is just make a new, like publish a new coloring book that you can buy that's like printed on nice paper. It's like the Bad Ink coloring book or something. Like rather than let people fiddle around with our existing pages, I think it would actually be more fun to give people things that I've never colored. So there's less pressure to replicate what I did, and it's like it would be like a bunch of stuff I had never colored. Do you know what I mean? So that way there's less pressure to replicate stuff, and it's quite literally an open canvas for people to play with and sort of experience themselves. What time is it? I gotta feed my cat soon, but I'll try to go a little bit longer. We might take another break, except this time instead of it being a bathroom break, it's going to be the cat feeding break. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's you can see how these columns are not super. Maybe I need to bump up the opacity on the layer. They're not super defined, but they do give you the sense that there's columns there. If I turn off the line art layer, it's not like it's not. I probably could clean it up a little bit. Like you can see how it's getting like a little muddled in here, but a little muddy in here. But the line art isn't super precise when you go that far back either, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a bad effect. Especially because the real focal point of this page, I mean, every line is pointing you down towards the right side here, towards this, like, book on the pedestal. So it's not really like somebody's going to spend a lot of time looking at the columns in the background here. So I probably don't need to worry too much about getting it perfect. The real decision is going to be, on this page, is going to be what color is this inset panel. Because I used yellow just for now as a placeholder, but I kind of feel like it could have some other vibe to it, especially because this. Let's do the beam. There's a yellow beam of light here in this big panel. This is a yellow beam, and I think you want this to be a different color so that it doesn't look like the beam continues down into this panel. Like I think you want to be very clear about what is what. So last time when I did the beam, it was just a yellow. The beam looks really cool here over on the left. I think I did a nice job here, so I might try to replicate that. What I like about it here is that I've got the white halftone, almost like motes. Like there's like motes in the God rays coming down. It's a really simple effect. I mean, it's just a couple swipes of a white halftone brush, but it gives the sense of like true rays of light in almost like a classical Renaissance painting with the God rays coming down. And then I used an orange to actually affect the line art underneath. Any place where the beam touches, the line art changes to this orange color. So it creates like a really nice added sense of depth. So I might do that over here too. So there you go. We'll just kind of roughen the shape of the beam with a gradient. Yeah, this already makes me realize that I don't want to use yellow for this inset panel because it's a really weird look to have the beam come down and be... It just looks like a mistake, you know what I mean? Like it looks like the beam changes shapes and then becomes a different shape. It's weird. Let's make it orange for now. That's already better. Like orangey. There's like this sort of like orange ochre color and like a tangerine color. It's nice. And then the book inside can be yellow. Let's do that. That's kind of cool. Once you push the background to a different value, then the book can be yellow, and then it can sort of feel like it's the book is glowing the way it does when it's under this yellow beam in the distant panel. Oops. Something like that. I don't know. We'll work on it. Do you color the pages in chronological order, or do you have a method by skipping pages? That's a really good question. So I actually intentionally skip around so that the book overall like if you color your comic in order, there's a natural drift that happens over the course of like 20, 30, 40 pages where you start to change styles because I don't know, for whatever reason you start to become comfortable with the color palette, or you kind of like develop new techniques as you go. And if you color your comic in chronological order, that drift is obvious as you read it front to back. Whereas if you color your comic out of order, you hide which pages you did early before you were super comfortable with that style and which pages you did later by shuffling them all together so that it creates this overall sense of unity. And what I do is I pick scenes that take place in similar time frames. So like pages 7 through 12 are this sequence in this temple, and I'll color those, and then I'll jump to some other sequence that takes place all together with its own kind of like look and feel, like pages 20 through 26, and I'll color all of those together. So I group things together so I can kind of match the look and feel of scenes that take place in the same location, but I also go out of order so I kind of hide any natural drift as I color the whole book, if that makes sense. So I'll color like a block early, a block later, a block in the middle, another block early, and I like, hopefully it actually, by jumping around a lot, it actually creates like an overall sense of unity because any drift is hidden in that process. But scenes are... individual scenes match each other, if that makes sense. It's very complicated, but the answer is I definitely color out of order in an effort to try to unify everything. I know that professional comic colorists will tell you you probably shouldn't color everything like in chronological order for that reason. Yeah, it's hard to explain, but like it's very human to like sit down and color and think that you're supposed to go in a certain order. But a lot changes as you go. Like if it takes you like 2 weeks to color something, your color style might be pretty different by the end of that 2 weeks. So I'm just coloring this beam with a really simple method where it's sort of, I call it the Lightsaber method. Whenever I'm coloring like a really bright beam of light or like a laser blast, I make the middle white and I make it fade to a color on the outside. So the brightest part of any beam, especially in science fiction, you'll see this, like any beam or laser blast or lightsaber, usually the middle is the brightest part, and so that's the whitest part. If you actually look at lightsabers, how they look in Star Wars, if you think of somebody as having like a blue lightsaber, it's only actually blue on the glowing outside. The middle of Luke's lightsaber is white, well, so is the middle of Darth Vader's lightsaber. It only fades to a color on the edges. So that's just like a quick, making the middle of a beam of light white is a quick cheat to kind of like instantly create a sense of intensity of the light. But because I've got all the pieces of the beam on different layers, I can now go in and manipulate them individually. So I can also make the white hot kind of like core of this beam of light, I can have that fade off as it comes down. So if this is the origin point up here of the beam, I can fade it off as it comes down, like creating the sense that it's getting less intense as it comes down. So you can see like by the end, there's no beam of light here. So there's like a multi-layered sense of light to dark on this beam, and it makes it feel like pretty real. It's pretty cool. Oh, see, I guess Mr. Woods actually like knows what you're talking about, because you have a much different schedule because you're dealing with pages as they actually come in like a monthly deadline. So you have to do them as they come in. Obviously, like a penciler and inker are going to be doing them in chronological order. We have more of like a graphic novel mindset, like an indie mindset, where we have the luxury of time to kind of like make our own schedule. And in that case, I think most people that would say like try to color them out of order, because then you can kind of like batch together scenes. You can like make scenes look more alike that way. Yeah, I don't envy you on the having to actually produce on a deadline, you know? It's pretty intense. All right, let's get some columns in over here on the right. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if I'm just like explaining things properly or if I'm just rambling. It's really, I swear, like coloring and answering questions, I'm still not used to how much brain power that takes. You know what I mean? Like it's like patting your head and rubbing your stomach or whatever. Like it's a very difficult thing to be concentrating on doing this properly while also answering questions that sometimes aren't about coloring. So I'm having to use like different parts of my brain at the same time. Sometimes I watch these lives back and I'm like, oh, that made a surprising amount of sense. I did explain that well. And sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Good luck, everyone else. If I can't understand it, like, there's no way anybody else is going to understand it. But sometimes it makes sense. Mr. Woods, do you cringe that I'm using the lasso tool instead of the pen tool? I know that, like, I get a lot of, like, I get roasted for using the pen tool, or for not using the pen tool, even though I totally can. I'm just lazy. And I get annoyed having to make a shape and then right-click and select and say, like, make selection. So I just use the polygonal lasso tool, and everybody is, like, astounded in the comments that I, like, don't know how to use Photoshop. I think it's really funny, actually. Or do you even work in Photoshop, Mr. Woods? Oh, these are the only streams you watch? Really? Man, you know what I was watching today? Is I was watching the T90 Hidden Cup, which is like the Age of Empires 2 championships. It's like the best Age of Empires players in the world. I was watching that earlier today before I went live. Like, man, that was so good. I don't like watch a lot of streams, but I watch Age of Empires 2 like pretty religiously. and I watch SM64 speedrunning, man, like I know some people think it's weird to spend so much time watching other people play video games, but when they're like the best in the world at Age of Empires 2, it's like genuinely as interesting to me as watching like professional athletes. I think it's so cool. Yeah, okay, good. You use Photoshop and Lasso tool. Yeah. That's just, I'm telling you right now, I know the pen tool is supposed to be better, but there is something, even though it's probably not that much extra time, it feels like such a pain in the ass to like have to make a path and then make it into a selection. And I know a lot of people say you're also supposed to save your paths to the path window or whatever, but I also never do that because I always just make a shape as a layer, and I can always just select that layer shape or do a clipping mask into it. Like I know there's all kinds of reasons why I probably should use the pen tool and paths more, but I just, the more I do this, the more I just want to do it quickly with the Lasso tool or like the marquee tool or whatever. All right, well, we're getting there. I'm gonna take a break. I gotta feed my cat, but I'll be right back. What do you guys want to listen to? You want to listen to which interdimensional soundtrack do you want to listen to? Do you want to listen to 1, which is like synthwave? Actually, both 1 and 2 are synthwave. Issue 3 is dungeon synth. It's up to you. 1. All right, we'll do 1. Mary loves 1 the most. Here. You like this song, Launch in Orbit. I'll be right back. I gotta feed my cat. I'll be right back. All right. I had to feed my cat. Sorry. My cat is a monster. A total wang, yeah. She's a total wang if unfed. All right, so I got columns in here. Let's put some shading in the water just to get some detail in there. It's funny because in some of these pages I put like a lot of detail in the water. Like this one, there's actually like quite a lot of shading here. But in the wide shot on page 5, I really didn't put that much detail in, and it looks okay. I'll do a little bit. I'm excited to finish this. So this is the last page in this column sequence, and I am ready for it to be done. It has been a very intense, very intense sequence. Like some of the most detailed pages in the whole comic. So that'll be nice when it's actually like all said and done. I'm very ready to move on to something new. The best part about this comic is that we made the decision that some of the pages would be black and white. And I did that partially because I wanted to pay tribute to like manga and 70s comics like Savage Sword of Conan, which were all printed in black and white. The thing that I knew it would save time, but I really had not realized how much time it saves. I can knock out black and white pages so fast, and I'm actually like wondering if we should just do black and white from now on, because the benefit of working in black and white in terms of a time save was shocking to me. It makes sense now why manga is all black and white. Because if you're trying to hit like weekly or bi-weekly deadlines, black and white is absolutely like the thing to do. I'm telling you, like, I knew it would save time, but it blows my mind how quickly I can knock out black and white pages, especially after like having only colored in color for my entire life. And it doesn't even feel like it should be allowed how much faster it is. Oh yeah, it's awesome that you created a soundtrack to go along with the comic. There are some narrative-driven modern board games that have done the same. Yeah, I follow there's this really cool account I follow on TikTok called Terrible Games. It's like a board game studio. They're pretty cool. They're like, I mean, they're like kindred spirits. They're like into comics and Saturday morning cartoons and heavy metal and like horror movie. Like it's very, and like D&D, like they're clearly the same brain as myself and fellow comic creators. But they've released soundtracks to their games on like cassette tape. Like it's like an old, like back in the day there were certain board games that came with like a VHS tape or a cassette tape. Like they're doing it both as like a nostalgia play and as like a mood setting piece of music, It's pretty cool. Those guys are awesome. I haven't seen Terrible Games post in a while. I hope they're still doing stuff. Or if they sort of fell victim to what happens to all of us, which is you kind of get burned out making content. Or the algorithm just isn't showing me their stuff, which is possible. I'm working on a board game right now that I hope to have interact with YouTube Shorts. That'd be cool. Like if you posted a bunch, you know what you should do? Industrial arts and crafts. Yeah, so the Star Trek VHS game is like very like foundational to my taste. I had that back in the day, and they got didn't they get like the guy who plays Gowron to do it? It was like a Klingon based game, right? Wasn't the whole plot having to do with Klingons, and they got like Gowron to be in it? I think they got Jonathan Frakes to shoot scenes for the Star Trek VHS game, didn't they? I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, if you're doing, you should do like a modern version of that, because I remember you would like play and then it would cue you to watch part of the tape. So you could totally, it would be easier now that everything's digital. You should make a bunch of like unlisted YouTube videos that like advance the story of the game, and like put QR codes or something on like a deck of cards in the game, and you can like, when it's time to advance the story or something, you like draw a card, scan the code, and then it pulls up some unlisted YouTube video that would only have like, 100 views because it's like only ever been watched when people get to that part of the game. That'd be so cool. Clearly I have thought about this before, but I'm like super interested in like physical experiences and digital media, like combining, crossing over, like 360 experiences across platforms. I think that stuff is so cool. Okay, cool. Damn, I missed the Terrible Games Kickstarter. I feel like an asshole. Because I really like those guys, and I do want to support them, but I think I was probably doing our Kickstarter for this probably around the same time, so I was probably so busy that I was not, like, processing what other people were doing, unfortunately. I should message those guys and see if I can get a hold of their new game, because they're cool. They've done, like, really cool... Terrible Games does some really cool stuff that's like kind of like minimalist, like low investment board games that you can just like play quickly. Oh yeah, haunted houses and escape rooms. That's cool. Yeah, what you could do is you could build an escape room, like a physical escape room, and then film chunks of it somehow, or like a maze. You could build like a physical maze, and then you could film somebody, like a POV, like somebody wearing a GoPro, like navigating through it. And then you could chop up those clips of like progressing through different parts of it, and you could make them YouTube shorts that are unlisted that you can only find the next piece of if you are playing a physical game and you like scan a QR code, so you can like go through a maze or an escape room via playing the game, but it's an actual set that you built and filmed. That'd be cool. Oh, nice. Terrible Games. Should we give Terrible Games a shout out? I'm too afraid to open the internet on stream. But Terrible Game. Everybody go to Kickstarter and search Terrible Games. They're awesome. They if they've got a Kickstarter live, we should everybody should go boost them because they're cool. Yeah, low budget AR. That's right. I love stuff like that. Like it's like how they would have done it in the VHS era. They would have like built a set and like had somebody go through on a camera and then like released the pieces on a VHS tape, and then the game would have told you to go to different time codes on the VHS. I love stuff like that. All right. let's see. So I'm just laying down like the first pass of shading on the water here. I'm gonna do the thing where I go back over it with a halftone brush, and the halftone will kind of like even it out a little bit and make it less I don't know, just less like, right now it's very obvious that I've just gone in with brush strokes here and just kind of laid it down quickly. It looks a little amateurish, so I'll use the halftone brush to kind of like cover it up and create kind of like an even it out a little bit, which is what we did up here. The halftone kind of like covers up some of that obvious chicken scratch brush stroke stuff that I was doing. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty old too. I know that I dress like somebody who's like 15 years old, but I am very much of the VHS. I'm very much of the VHS era. So I remember that stuff. Oh, nice. I just bought V for Vendetta and the original Ninja Turtles comic. I mean, V for Vendetta is an absolute classic. I love the original Ninja Turtles. It'll be interesting, like Mirage era Ninja Turtles is, to me, is less about the actual Ninja Turtles stories and more about like how inspiring it is that two guys in their kitchen made a comic that became a worldwide phenomenon. I think when you read the original Ninja Turtles, keep in mind that was a different era when it was very hard to be an independent comic artist who made money, and those two guys literally in their kitchen passing pages back and forth across two drawing tables invented something that became the massive behemoth that is Ninja Turtles, you know? Because some of those original Ninja Turtles comics, they're not like the most professional looking thing or the most some of it started as a parody of Daredevil, so some of the original stories are kind of cliche because they were going for like more of a silly parody vibe. So just keep that in mind, that like the original Ninja Turtles it's as much about the story behind it as it is the actual comics. But if you want to read a really good series, read the IDW reboot of Ninja Turtles that started in like 2010, 2011. Because they brought back Peter Laird, one of the original Ninja Turtles dudes, to like craft the script and the story. And it's really good. It's got like modern art and a little bit more ambition to tell a longer story over like 150 issues. So check out the IDW Ninja Turtles too, because it's really good. I don't know. This halftone might be too small for what I want it to do. I don't know. It's okay. Let's try it. I may want to redo this with a bigger dot size. I'm not sure. Because I've got it on 30, which I thought was going to be big enough, but it's a little small. Like, I almost kind of wanted you to see the dots here a little bit more. Yeah, I'm I don't know, it's really hard, I think, for people nowadays to understand how hard it would have been to be a successful indie comic creator back in like the early 80s. I mean, you can imagine what it would be like it's already so hard to create a new comic that people actually care about. All people really want is to read established characters and properties. You know what I mean? Like, and it was even more so back then. Like, there were there was even less of an appetite. Like nowadays we have like modern Image Comics, which has done a really good job of like showing that comics are independent, like creator-owned series can be really good and can be done by very, very respected artists. But back then, you know, you've got something weird like Ninja Turtles, which again, like we're all used to, but imagine how weird that was back then. You don't have the internet. You don't have the ability to publish digitally, so you have to print your comics in order to get them out there. And the only way to get the word out is to like go to conventions and physically try to sell your comic. I mean, those guys must have just been hustling, and like you would have had to start like a fan club by mail, where people would have, the only way to like really engage with them would have been to sign up for some kind of like mail newsletter. The amount of work they would have had to do to like actually physically print the comics, schlep them around from convention to convention, and then like maintain a mail-in fan program, like that alone makes me anxious. And then they actually did it. Like they got huge. They got so big that they turned their comic into like, you know, video games and cartoons and I don't know, action figure. Like it just blows my mind. Like the amount of, I know it's a lot of it is luck, but I think those guys should deserve more credit as like businessmen and the level of ambition and work it took to get to that point. You know, I'm obsessed with Ninja Turtles as a success story. As an indie creator, that's why I think Ninja Turtles is interesting. Is like almost more so than the actual story or the characters, even though I love that too. Yeah, newsletters and mailing lists and conventions. That's why the original Ninja Turtles comics are so expensive, because those guys really couldn't afford to print a ton of copies. I mean, the first printing of the first issue of Ninja Turtles was only like several thousand copies, because those guys were like, I think they borrowed money from one of their dads to be able to fund the first print run. If that gives you a sense of like what it took back then to be a comic creator. I mean, they're really, like nowadays I can call Comics Wellspring and say like, I need 10 copies because I don't know if they're going to sell. And they'll be like, all right, here you go. But there were minimum print runs back then. You know what I mean? Like they wouldn't turn on the presses back then unless you were printing at least a few thousand copies probably. So if you were going to start an indie comic, you were also going to be stuck with inventory that you had to sell. So the level of hustle was out of control, because like you don't want 4,000 Ninja Turtles comics in your garage. You know what I mean? Like you got to get out to conventions and sell them. Yeah, I do agree. I think luck is you can make your own luck. I think they say, you know, oh, you know, that person was just in the right place at the right time. But it's like it takes some skill to know the marketplace, to know how to be in the right place at the right time. You know what I mean? To read kind of like the room and know where you can fit your work in and take advantage of any opportunity that comes your way. Like I think I think you can absolutely make your own luck, especially in a creative field. All right, so I went crazy with the halftone. It's okay. It's got like kind of it's a little sickly blue for my taste, so I might try some stuff with it. So I'm gonna go back over the halftone with this light blue. Oh wait, did I still have a halftone brush? Hang on. I gotta go back to a regular airbrush. And I'm just gonna, I'm going to click and you're going to watch the halftone just basically look like it's disappearing. Because I'm going over the halftone with the same color as the background blue. So I turned off the halftone, and I just sampled this blue, this light blue, that's the color of the ocean, and then I'm painting it back over the halftone. So you get kind of the sense of like the halftone fading off, if that makes sense. Like you can see how anywhere, I'll turn this on and off, anywhere I painted this blue, it starts to like cover up the halftone, and I can control that by starting to lower the opacity on that blue cover up. So I can bring the halftone back a little bit. That's nice. Now it kind of has a sense of texture without it being overbearing in places. Yeah, it just kind of like evens it out, you know what I mean? All right. And then I also want to, I feel like this whole panel is too samey. Like I like that it drops off into like darker blue and darker blue and darker purple over in the right. But this whole ocean has just kind of become a very flat blue. So I'm going to create a sense of light coming from this side with a gradient. Yeah, it's kind of nice. But I do want to bring back some of the shading up here because I like that it went to purple. Yeah, it's okay. It's really hard to do these like huge expanses of water that are both detailed enough to feel like you really developed them, but not overly detailed so they get busy. And that's the dance. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just too blue. Maybe it's like, what if this was pink instead? I think I need to start introducing this color more. The pink colors in my palette are really nice. And if I actually did that, it might feel a little bit more sophisticated, like the left side starts to mirror the moving to the magenta over on the right. Yeah, see, like that's cool. That's really cool. I think that really helps, actually. It's a little bit bold, but see how it now makes the halftone pink? Yeah, that feels right. I really want... Okay, that's better. Because the danger with a big panel like this is that it just becomes this flat, boring shape, and just using gradients to kind of like shake it up is really nice. That feels right. It's pretty bold to have it go from that pink to blue back to purple. Like if I turn the lines off, you can see how much color variation there is. To have it pink in the lower left, blue in the middle, dark blue, dark purple on the right. But man, it really creates the sense that I'm going for, that this is a dream, that things are surreal, that there's like kind of like this amorphous merging style. Yeah, pink, that's so much better now. It suddenly makes me like this page so much, because look, if I turn this, if I turn the pink off, I just have to find it. It's like this even blue, and it just kind of feels like, in a bad way, it feels like an old cartoon when they were like on deadlines and just had to like knock out backgrounds really fast. But if it goes to pink, it suddenly feels like painterly and sophisticated. It's cool. I like that a lot. That was kind of the secret sauce I was kind of seeking that I couldn't find. And maybe I can actually bring that into this panel on the top left. Maybe there's an opportunity to push it to pink too. Like up top. Because see how it's getting like really, it just kind of, once it goes dark up in this top area, it just becomes the same blue the whole way. So if we just put a pink gradient over it, that might be really cool. Here. Yeah, I like that a lot. It doesn't really make any sense. Like there's no reason why there should be that color there, but it just creates kind of a variation that makes it, you know what it does is it creates a, it kind of like creates a sense of parallelism with the color of this character who's like pink. It's nice, I like it. Yeah, line check looks good. It passed line check. We'll do one last line check real quick. Yeah, wow. I'm so glad I did the pink in the lower left corner, because I was not feeling this page. It was feeling so samey, but now it feels like a lot more varied. I also don't love, I think I didn't do a good job on these. The white. I don't think I did I think these are bad. Like I think I used too big of a brush and went too quickly. I think that's like a good placeholder, but I think I want to go in and actually do it a little bit more nuanced. Create like, maybe I can do that real quick with a white halftone. So if I get a white halftone brush and set the dots to kind of bigger than I normally use, that might help. Because you can kind of just cover up some of the ugliness that I did. And it also creates a sense of like water spray, so I can put it coming off of the top of the waves too. So yeah, I'm just painting it in, and then I'm erasing some of the dots back out, just to create a sense of a fade. That helps a little bit. I don't know. We'll see if I keep this once I'm off stream. I'm kind of just like flying by the seat of my pants while I'm on stream. Because no one wants to watch me sit here silently and just stare at this and figure out what I'm doing. I'm just kind of trying things. That is interesting though, the halftone. Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike that effect. All right, so we'll do a last line check. Before we do that, so here's where we started. Wow, it's different. So this is where the page was when I started the stream like 3 hours ago. Here's where we got to. It's pretty developed. I mean, it still needs like multiple more hours, but there's where we started. You can see how flat all the oceans were. Top left panel is super flat. Bottom panel is super flat. And then that's where we got to. The pink is really good. I like that more than I expected. The pink up here in the columns looks really cool too. That's the kind of stuff I want to start doing more. Where I'm just kind of using random colors just for fun. And then here's what it looks like if we, so we'll do last line check. So turn the line layer off, and we're just looking for, we're not really looking to make sure that the shapes are precise. We're just making sure that things kind of pop from each other, that like everything, every shape that's there is defined in terms of color and contrast and value. So things like, so things like, is green the right color to use for this character? Does that make her pop enough? Maybe not, because you can see where the green crosses over some of these background columns. It's sort of like, if you squint, it sort of starts to get lost. So maybe she needs to be a different color. You're also paying attention to stuff like, are the panel gutters, popping from the panel interiors so that there's very clear differentiation between the panels. I think so. I think it looks like it. Things, I mean, then there's really obvious things like, are the columns popping from the background? Is this beam of light popping from the background? And so far, yeah. It looks good. So here, wait, I'll pull up some other pages in the sequence so you can see kind of like how it's shaping up. So here's the spread. So these pages are concurrent. That's how they'll actually appear in print next to each other. So the other thing I'm doing here is I'm making sure that they're cohesive as a spread, because you have to remember that when you're printing comics, you're never seeing a page in isolation. You're always seeing them together. So you have to make sure that the pages that are supposed to go together do cohesively go together. So I'm not randomly using some color on the page on the right that's not on the page on the left. You know what I mean? But the pink actually, I was talking about how I like this pink gradient down on the bottom left. That actually matches some of the pink color in this panel over here on the page on the left, or on her dress, or even in the shadows on the rock wall here. So it's nice. It really goes together. They're a really good spread. Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I think it looks pretty sick too. Cool. Well, with that, I think we're going to end it. I made some pretty significant progress on panel 1 on the page on the left, or on the right. So hopefully in my ramblings, we kind of talked through enough techniques that somebody learned something, you know what I mean? But I gotta walk I fed my cat, now I have to walk my dog. So life goes on. Thank you everybody for tuning in. This was really fun. And yeah, we're just kind of chipping away at this is Interdimensional 3. It will be done soon, then we'll print it, then you can buy it, you can actually read the whole thing, and all the weirdness will suddenly make sense, hopefully. But I'll close it out with some music here. We'll do the issue 1 soundtrack again. Thanks everybody for showing up. You guys are great. I appreciate you all. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.